Hey everyone, and welcome to another video on the history of Monster Hunter. Today we'll be taking a look at the various flagship monsters found throughout the series. A flagship, for those of you who are unaware of the term, refers to the monster that gets promoted on the cover art, featured in the introduction, and often plays a pivotal role in the game's offline story. Like any other poster character, fans tend to grow very attached to the flagships of the games they started with and played through. These flagships share a number of similarities and have some defining characteristics we'll cover in today's video. Naturally, I'll be covering numerous stories from the games, so if you don't want spoilers, you may want to consider skipping this video. Without further ado, here's my list of the various flagships found within Monster Hunter. Let's start with the most iconic flagships in Monster Hunter, Rathalos and Tigrex. Both of these monsters have left a lasting impression on the community, mostly due to their surprising introduction early in their games. Various hunters will recount how simple gathering quests turned out to be a lot more difficult than they had initially expected. The two creatures presented the player with a seemingly unbeatable opponent, and gave beginners something to work up to, a mountain to conquer. After honing your skills and surpassing these flagships, you'll unlock access to end-rank quests and challenges. Little did we know they were merely preparing us for monsters yet to come. That being said, Rathalos is clearly the most iconic monster in Monster Hunter. Nearly every flying wyvern is compared to him to some extent. He has made an appearance in every game and has paved the way for every flagship that followed. The King of the Skies is so popular and integral to the series that his subspecies would even serve as the flagship to 2 games. But we'll get to his azure-coated brethren shortly. Tigrex, on the other hand, is the only flagship to get close to the level of recognition that Rathalos has. It earned this recognition through brute force, quite literally. Like Rathalos, in Monster Hunter Freedom 2, Tigrex is an apex predator who crushes the hopes and dreams of newcomers. With a roar that could damage you, a series of homing charges, and those pulsing red veins whenever it got agitated, it was terrifying, making a great rival and living up to the monster part of Monster Hunter. Just a quick fun fact, Rathalos and Tigrex were also the only monsters to be featured as secret bosses in the game Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. As if Rathalos wasn't famous enough, the Monster Hunter team marketed 2 flagships specifically designed to rival Rathalos, though in slightly different ways. Lagiacrus and Seregios both make surprise appearances before their actual fights, are apex predators, and play a pivotal role in the stories they are a part of. However, that's about all they have in common. Lagiacrus is more of a direct mirror to Rathalos. For example, it is the first large leviathan the hunter encounters while on a gathering quest, just as Rathalos is the first large flying wyvern. Both of these monsters fight in Monster Hunter Tri's opening, are weak to each other's elements, bully new players, and share the respective title for kings for both the sea and sky respectively. Lagiacrus even adopts the area's theme, just as Rathalos uses the Forest and Hills soundtrack. There's just not a whole lot separating the two. At most, Lagiacrus has a different role in the story of this game, as he is the assumed culprit of the earthquakes threatening the village, and like Monoblos, has a history with the village chief. Unlike the sea monster, Seregios is presented as more of a direct challenge to Rathalos' domain, the sky. While it does not share nearly the same number of characteristics that Lagiacrus does with Rathalos, Seregios, being an invasive species like Rajang and Double O, attacks a nearby Rathian in the story of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Naturally, messing with the Queen of the Earth does not sit well with Rathalos, and the two are seen fighting later on. Interestingly, Seregios even distorts Rathalos' theme song, twisting it into its own unique melody. While you could argue that both these monsters are designed to piggyback off of Rathalos' fame, they both perfectly capture the games they are from. the former trying to create an interesting redesign of the elements found in the original games, and the latter which directly challenges the previous titles in an attempt to create a new classic. To shake things up a bit, 3 flagships seem to be designed to change up the usual formula of the games. Nargacuga, Zinogre, and Brachydios surprised players by changing everything they had learned up until that point. Through unconventional movesets, new rage patterns, new modes, and even a new status ailment, they were able to breathe fresh life into the games. In Freedom Unite, Nargacuga appears to be the foil of Tigrex. Instead of being a straight-minded, brutal, and impatient creature, Nargacuga is cunning, deliberate, cautious, and sensitive, though it still loses its composure in a bout of rage. Up until its introduction, the majority of monsters tended to attack head-on, and spun their tails in a very similar manner. Nargacuga refined how monsters could use their bodies, attacking with the sides of its blade arms, while using its spiked tail as a whip, and firing off its own scales. Nargacuga sparked a wave of change in the series, but it certainly was not the only monster to shake up old formulas. Shortly afterwards, in Monster Hunter Portable III, Zinogre would be the first monster to have a charged state. While other modes had been introduced, such as White Fatalis' armor mode, this was the first time a monster had a separate state that they needed to complete and maintain in order to enter Rage mode. Zinogre also chained attacks in a way that no other creature had, by tracking the hunter and slamming its forelimbs. Speaking of forelimbs, Brachydios came along in 3 Ultimate with a completely new fighting style and status to boot. It fends off opponents by walking up to them and punching them with its arms coated in an explosive slime. This slime quickly became one of the most popular status effects and nearly broke the meta in the game it was debuted in. With its wacky attack patterns, new effects, it quickly became a favorite amongst newcomers. These 3 flagships offered rather unexpected and very unique experiences, often serving as skill checks for newer players and teaching them how to properly read a monster's animations and evade. Leaving a lasting impression, their popularity in the community is something that should not be understated. Monster Hunter storytelling has definitely improved in a number of areas, and nothing reflects this better than Gore Magala and Nergigante. These two serve as the primary antagonists in the newer games, and unlike every flagship that came before, they not only attack the player, but shape most of the events in these modern stories. Gore's presence is felt even in the post-game of Monster Hunter 4 and 4 Ultimate. It is a juvenile Elder Dragon with scales imbued with a new status ailment, known as the Frenzy Virus. This virus causes various monsters to enter a zombie-like state and go berserk, while people afflicted by it lose their ability to recover health naturally without the aid of healing items. The virus is also the reason for the unnatural mass migration of Seregios, which nearly upends local ecosystems. Upon realizing the threat that this monster's mere existence poses, the guild dispatches the player to face off against Gore Magala's molted form, Shigaru Magala. In Monster Hunter World, Nergigante is an Elder Dragon eating Elder Dragon, whose actions and aggression cause a ton of trouble for the 5th Fleet. It frightens one of the researchers by killing a Baroth, interferes in 2 major operations to stop the walking volcanoes or Magdaros, and causes the local Elder Dragons to leave the recess, disturbing other areas in the New World. Unlike Gore, Nergigante deliberately wreaks havoc and causes trouble, giving the character a bit more agency in the story. It also serves as a decent gateway Elder Dragon, as it definitely fits right in with Kushala and Teostra. Gameplay-wise, both hunts unlock end rank content, and if you include Shigaru, arguably occur at the climax of the story. Despite being rather new, both these monsters are rising in popularity, not only for being a decent adversary, but also for having some narrative depth. Their fights are rather interesting, and use a couple of new mechanics, but are not the highlight of these flagships. Not every flagship is widely recognized. Considering there are so many games, some of these monsters are bound to be overlooked. Azure Rathalos and Kushala are often forgotten as flagships. That's not to say the monsters are unpopular, but not many people have played the games they debuted in. Being the first and second flagships in the series, they do not get the same level of recognition as the first one, but still come from the early era of Monster Hunter when the series had a relatively small following. Despite this, both monsters mark significant advancements in the series as a whole. Azure Rathalos is the only monster to be a flagship of multiple games. First in Monster Hunter G and its port Freedom, along with being featured in the box art and in the introduction of Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. Azure is often used to signal the arrival of subspecies along with a G-rank expansion. Subspecies tend to come in a variety of different colors and have slightly changed AI, new moves, unique equipment, and different weaknesses from their original counterparts. The creators intended them to be something akin to shiny Pokemon, a rarer variation of the original monster. Unfortunately, the games Azure flagships in do not give them the same significance they afford the original Rathalos. Overall, this monster has been rather sidelined. Luckily, Kushala does get the full flagship treatment, being featured in an urgent quest in the offline village and showing up as a boss in the online town. However, the game it spearheads in is Monster Hunter DOS, a game which never made its way outside of Japan. Kushala marks a turning point in the series, where more non-Wyvern categories began to develop, and Elder Dragons became less isolated from the rest of the cast, now showing up frequently in regular areas rather than appearing in special arenas. Kushala almost could have been lumped in with the previous category, as it shares a number of similarities with modern villainous flagships, but is much more of a pioneer. Though it may not get as much recognition as some of the other flagships, near the end of the story of Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, there's a neat callback to its time as a flagship in Monster Hunter DOS. In fact, Kushala may get another fitting nod in Monster Hunter World's expansion Iceborne, as the icon featured in the title looks reasonably similar to Kushala's original status bar, but I'll have to make a separate video about that later. If you saw my previous video on Monster Hunter Generations, I'll keep this section brief. I've already covered the Fated 4 fairly extensively, but I'll do my best not to repeat too many of the same things in this video. The Fated 4 are the first flagships to have a group dynamic, as they all counter each other's elements and come from the same game. The members include Glavenus, Gameth, Astalos, and Mizitsune, along with another monster we'll get to later. Each member represents a different generation and style, is an apex predator, rivals a previous flagship, is a different species, has a deviant, and uses a different element. These four, although new, draw from aspects of previous generations, making them feel fresh yet familiar. They really are memorable and unique, even among flagships. Naturally, Generations Ultimate added two more flagships into the mix: Valstrax, Champion of the Fated Four, and Bloodbath Diablos, King of the Deviants. While they are not the first flagships to be final bosses, as a number of previous flagships have been the offline conclusions for various games, these two are specifically geared to be the final test for the player. Monster Hunter tends to teach players how to fight monsters by slowly introducing the player to slightly stronger creatures with a similar body structure and similar attacks to the ones they've gotten used to. For example, Congalala introduces the player to a very basic moveset from an ape frame that harder creatures, like Bongalanga, will later expand upon. Most of these body structures will eventually have a monster that serves as the final challenge for that particular skeleton, like Rajang does for the previously mentioned fanged beasts. Valstrax takes the frame that was introduced with Gormagala and expands upon it. While Shigaru and Gogmazios use that skeleton, Valstrax gives the build more of a proper final challenge. Like before, I'd like to thank a friend of mine for pointing this one out to me. Valstrax also thematically serves as the head of the Fated Four, wielding the last and most powerful element, Dragon, while also still being weak to all 4 of the previous elements. It even fittingly follows the theme of 6 flagships, having 6 limbs and 6 jet appendages. But enough about the Sky Comet Dragon. The real challenge of Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate is Bloodbath Diablos. If regular hunts weren't challenging enough, Generations Ultimate features Deviant monsters, which are regular monsters with an added quirk. Bloodbath takes the brutality of these deviants and pushes it to their absolute limit, giving one of the most aggressive monsters increased speed, second rage mode, and steam eruptions caused by its absurd rise in body temperature. Together with Valstrax, they form the duo The Unrivaled Two. Needless to say, these flagships serve as arguably the most challenging flagships the series has ever seen. Not every flagship perfectly fits into one particular category, and you can make a different list for all the flagships, but this has been my overview of the various flagships found within the main series of Monster Hunter. Which flagship is the most memorable for you? If you would like to see more videos like this one, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.